So, I've got George Hearn with me here from UDO Synthesizers.
Hi, Gaz.
It's time for 3 big questions. Okay.
Okay.
So, question number 1 is
sure.
about past. What instrument or thing really kind of hooked you, or was maybe like something that changed everything for you?
I think really there's 2 things. There's 2 parts to this.
That's okay.
I remember there was a really crappy music department at school with a really odd music teacher who was quite frankly strange and, but he brought in one day an instrument. And so he'd been talking to us about, we're doing classical music theory, whatever, and, we're just doing whatever. And then one day, it's totally off curriculum, he brought in a synthesizer. And he was like, oh yeah, so I just thought I'd bring this in to show you. No idea what it was. We all just looked at it, thought it was a bit of a novelty, but I was fascinated. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember it had those spun lever toggle switches, like you'll find on the Super 6 that we've made, and also a lot of classic synthesizers. I remember them really clearly, those sort of nice spun aluminium tubes. And he brought this thing in and made some weird kind of oscillator drones and noises, totally different to everything else we've been learning about. And I was like, what the hell is that? I don't know what it's for. I don't know why someone would make that thing, but I love it. I want it. I remember that. And so that's thing number 1. But also from the past, I got an album by Ad2X called On the Wires of Our Nerves. I'd heard it on John Peel. I'd heard the title track, On the Wires of Our Nerves, being played with this lovely kind of warm arpeggiated sequence that was just so unreal, but yet at the same time so organic and so beautiful sounding. I ran out to go, I think it was HMV back in the day, and it was still around, but to go and find this album after John Peel played it. I got this album, and on the cover is someone pulling out a Moog Rogue out of somebody's chest on the album artwork. And I was just like, yeah, that's the thing I saw in the music club. I don't know, I want it. And then I sort of remember chatting enthusiastically in the music shop about this and about the kind of instruments. He's like, yeah, that's an analog synthesizer, that is. And I was like, cool. And ever since then, I think that was Ad2X, that album, On the Wires of Our Nerves, and looking at those instruments kind of shaped the things that I like in terms of instruments, basically. And that sort of odd kind of a retro vision of what the future might be that never quite happened, born out of like the end of the space race and things like that. This idea of this super future, instruments named after planets and things. It's just, yeah. So I think those 2 things basically.
Amazing. Okay, so we're now gonna move to the present.
Yeah.
What's currently floating your boat? What are you kind of currently into? I mean, obviously, other than developing the Super 6.
Yeah.
Or what has the Super 6 kind of like opened to you? Where are you at?
I think I'm not going to think just about instruments, but talk generally about all instruments in this sort of answer to this one. And I think there is this movement going on. Maybe not so much at the moment in like electronics and goods, but let's say talk about, I don't know, architecture and clothing and people's consumer choices. People have started thinking more and engaging more with like materials and process and methods than people thought about it before. Think about the resurgence of vinyl, about how you're seeing kind of like lots of modern buildings being put up using natural materials and sort of wood cladding. Think about how people's clothes, how like people are sort of more interested now in like wools and kind of like natural fibers and natural fabric and kind of people have got an awareness when it comes to things like sort of foods and the goods that they buy. And I think what's interesting for me now is this increasing, it's not fully there yet, but it's increasing awareness of materials and processes and things that are not all that they seem, that you can't compare 2 things like for like, because one thing may have had so much more care and attention put into certain aspects. And I think with a lot of the kind of easier access to manufacturing and electronics development, it's allowing expressive people to do interesting things and this sort of bit more than the sum of its parts.
And move away a bit from corporate disposability, perhaps, something a little bit more...
Yes.
Something of more
yes.
value.
Absolutely. So if I'm talking about instruments, I'm really excited by, the stories behind things and the more personality that's being injected into a lot of instruments that are coming along. And, things where people are not being afraid to make something that's like, a bit more expensive but is made really, really well. And I think that, like, if it comes to like clothing or all sorts of things, sort of having things that last and that are built, and I think, and sort of having things that are about personality and process, and you know, I'm liking really seeing the kind of the diversification of electronic musical instruments. And so, yeah, so rather than a particular instrument that catches my eye, I'm sort of thinking more like a general movement.
That's great. So, I mean, the third question being the future, I guess this is a continuation of that, or what? Have you got your eye on in like an instrument, or do you plan to maybe take some time out and do some recording? Or because obviously having the Super 6 literally just about to launch properly into the market, the future is obviously very much Super 6 coloured. But what have you got planned, or what are you thinking about future-wise?
Well, so I think there's definitely big aspects about our launch product, the Super 6, which is a hybridization of sort of past, present, and future. I think future instruments, I think that we're only just starting to touch and harness the power of some of the modern electronic devices that exist. And there are some really exciting techniques that are sort of, some techniques that might have actually been developed in the past but never saw light of day because the processor power wasn't enough, or that the actual realization of the technology wasn't really practical in some sort of instrument. But I think if we take this rapidly advancing amount of processor power, FPGAs are a great sort of technology for music which is not being fully harnessed yet. And what those things can do in terms of like real-time parallel processing, you mix that with, you know, a movement towards, you know, solidity and longer lasting, more sort of sustainable production, and sort of brand new technology, but not technology for technology's sake, hybridized with like really tactile, sort of solid instruments. I think the future, and also the sort of democratization of manufacturing and electronics, I'm really excited about. So in the future, I'd like to see more artisanal, more bespoke, more like personality, high-made quality instruments that leverage, you know, really fantastic, exciting new technology at the same time. That's, you know, that sort of perhaps away from, like you say, the big corporate sphere of things. I would really like to see that. And I think it's coming.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Josh, thank you so much for taking time out to have this question.
Thank you, guys.
And yeah, brilliant. Thank you.